Hello, and welcome to the Hello You Show, where we talk about big dreams and taking real action. Through transformative stories, a bit of neuroscience, and real conversations, this show is here to help you explore creating your next level life with authenticity and passion. I'm Jessica Rice, a design techie and former engineering leader turned vision evolution coach on a mission to help other women rise up and lead a life of purpose. So get cozy and say hello again to the real you. Hello, my name is Jessica Rice. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am your host, and we'll be talking today a little bit more about how we bring our full selves into our work, our lives, the way that we show up every day. This is such an important topic to me, and I felt like it was really important, especially right now, to discuss it and to share it because it came up in several conversations that I had with clients, and I thought we should really talk about this on the show. And here's the thing. So often we don't acknowledge ourselves. We don't acknowledge what we bring. We don't acknowledge our strengths. We don't acknowledge our talents, our gifts. We don't even acknowledge our progress. And this is so fundamentally an issue for us because we don't even recognize that we are self-sabotaging every single day. Think about it. When someone gives you a compliment, do you receive it? When they say, hey, good job, well done, you did this really well. I like the way that you showed up in that meeting. Do you fully own it and receive it? Or do you immediately discount it and say, oh, well, that was okay. Oh, I could have done this better. Are we letting our humility come in? Or maybe even our ego trying to protect us. We really don't want to fail. So it comes in and it says, oh, no, this wasn't that great. We don't fully own it. And yet this is counterintuitive to how our brains process and really work on creating motivation for ourselves. We are ignoring our good work. We are ignoring our strengths. We are ignoring our progress. What does this mean when we do this? We can all think of people who lack self-confidence, who are continually proving themselves, who are continually trying to please others, who struggle knowing and feeling valued and heard. And that can show up in a lot of very ways, right? It can go from being meek and feeling like they're taking on too much, to burning themselves out, to quite the opposite side, which is frustration and anger and irritability because they're not receiving what it is that they want, which is to feel validated. And what really needs to happen is that we need to start from within. We need to validate ourselves. We can't look always to other people to validate us, what it is that we bring. Sometimes even they'll validate our thoughts, they'll validate our opinions, they'll validate our ideas. But we don't validate our strengths. We don't validate the work that we're doing. And then therefore, essentially are telling our mind that it's just not that important. So what do you feel like this does then for when we set a certain goal for ourselves? How do you feel like this motivates our mind to continue to move forward, to improve, to reach those bigger goals and dreams? What are we telling ourselves? Are we telling ourselves it's possible? Are we telling ourselves it's impossible? It's really hard to feel motivated if we feel like we keep trying and we just can't ever get there. It's like having an endless task list that you just can't check off. And furthermore, it's like having a task list that just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it's constantly staring at you, and you never accomplish anything. Maybe you feel like that sometimes in your job. Sometimes I know we do. But what happens oftentimes when we do those tasks, you check them off, and they disappear. I was having a conversation with another neuroscientist, and we were talking about how we, in effect, help the dopamine spikes in our brains to help us recognize our progress. That doesn't happen very readily when we are continually telling ourselves that what we've done isn't enough. I had a conversation with a client this morning who was telling me that, I have to keep moving forward. I have to keep honing myself. I have to keep improving. I'm still working on all of these strengths. Yes, this is a good start, but, and he would negate every time his progress. What is that telling his brain? That the progress that he's made isn't good enough. I'm going to ask you, are you good enough? Do you feel good enough ever? That doesn't mean that you don't need to continue to improve. It doesn't mean that you are ready to stagnate. But if we never feel good enough, how are we going to believe that we can accomplish more in our lives? How are we going to believe that we can take on new challenges? How are we going to believe that it's possible for us to get better, to improve, to hone, if we don't first start by saying, hey, you did a pretty good job there? Do you validate yourself? Do you acknowledge what you've done? How do you track that? How do you take note of that? It was interesting in my conversation. I asked, how is it that you know when you've done a good job? Well, it would need to be top of mind. We were talking about that. Well, it is, how do you make something top of mind? You have to put a system in place so that you are making sure that you are taking note of when you do good things. And the more that you do that, the more top of mind it is, the more that you are reminding yourself, hey, that feels pretty good. And you start doing those things more often. If all you have are sticky notes telling you that you should do something and you never complete it, you never, bring it full circle by acknowledging and demonstrating to yourself that what it is that you're telling yourself all the time that you should do, if you're not acknowledging when you do it, you're essentially telling yourself that you didn't and that you're continually starting over every day. So what does this leave you when you're starting to think about potentially a career change? What does this leave you when you're thinking about how you move up in your role? Where does this leave you when you're thinking about how you want to become a better leader? If you take a service-based approach to your life, and you take a service-based approach to how you show up every day, well, a person who is in service understands and owns the value that they bring, which is why they bring a service. First responders, firefighters, EMTs, sure, they have self-doubts and worries at times, but they know what they bring, which is why they show up and they bring a service. What are you in service to? Who are you in service to? And are you in service to even yourself? How are you serving yourself? I'm not talking about being selfish and self-serving in every capacity. What I'm saying is, if you want to show up and improve yourself, then we first have to acknowledge what it is that we do well, our strengths, and validate that. There's an assessment that I do with clients quite often called Principles U. And in there, we talk about archetypes. It's a strengths-based assessment, but it goes over all the traits and facets and weaknesses and everything that we bring to the table. And so as a certified coach for Principles U, I will dive in deeper with clients to talk about how they can really look at those strengths as a way that that they can leverage them to the fullest. And that looking at our weaknesses is not about how we make those weaknesses necessarily better. It's about how do we show up for ourselves when we have to operate inside of those areas where we might not be as strong. What tools, what techniques, who do we lean on in those cases? So it's not really a weakness, it's a tactic. And when we have a strength, how do we show up in service, greater service to others and ourselves and our roles so that those can really shine? If we're continually looking at where we fall short, that's our gap because we are missing the strengths that we bring. If we're continually looking at what it is that we didn't do enough of, if we're continually discounting the efforts that we have made, that's our gap. And if you want to fill the gap, start with acknowledging what it is that you do right, what it is that you do well. And really from a humble place, you can do this. You can do it from a place where it is of service. And you can think about your passions and your purpose and what brings you value and meaning and how these things tie together for you so that you're completing the picture. And in doing so, you can fully show up as yourself. You can bring more muchness of yourself into the world in a way that you can be impactful and powerful and a change maker. These things are not from ego, it's from service. But it's hard to do these things if you don't first acknowledge and honor what you bring. And it starts by what we tell ourselves. And how do we tell our brain and inform it that what we're doing is enough? Sure, we always have room to grow, but it's so much better to grow a strength than to try to grow a weakness. We don't always have to be strong in every area. That's where strategy comes in. That's where leaning on other people and acknowledging other people comes into play as well. But if you can think about how you want to rise up, you have to first think about where it is that you can start and what you bring to the table. Then you have to be willing to tell yourself that you're good at something. Well done. Look at the progress that we've made. Look at the things that I have done. This is you moving from being self-sabotaging yourself to really honoring and honing who you are as a leader within your field and how you can then move and operate in even greater ways than you can possibly imagine. Sure, there's always things that we need to hone, but it first starts from within us and believing, and it's really hard to believe in something if we don't believe in ourselves. But I felt like it was really important to really just dive into that because it probably sounds like I'm repeating myself, but I think it's important to drive this home because so often people discount themselves. Because so often we negate ourselves. So often we just look at what it is that we have to do next. And we're constantly in this cycle of churn and not in a cycle of reward. How do you celebrate? How do you reward yourself? Honoring ourselves is not ego, it's service, so that you can continue to serve in an even greater way. And you can model that then for others as well. If this is interesting, I'm going to be doing a talk March 19th for the Women's Thrive Summit. I'll be talking about how, to a greater extent, you can harness your strengths, harness your experience, your passions, and your purpose so that you can continue to rise up in your career. When we can do this for ourselves, now we can give our gifts to others. Now we can shine in ways that we couldn't before. Now we're not being selfish, we're the opposite. And we're blooming and blossoming into the person that we were intended to be. And I hope that you can really receive this message because I think it's so crucial and important when we think about how we can grow our lives and ourselves in such a deeper and more meaningful way so that we can find resonance in our lives. Thank you so much for joining me. Please make sure to stay tuned next Tuesday, where we're going to have another amazing guest. And I'll make sure to go ahead and put the talk registration within the show notes so that if you're interested, you can register there. Until then, make sure that you remember to honor yourself. Remember to believe that you have something that is special and unique and valuable that you bring to this world. Until then, keep shining and being you. If you found value in our conversation and want to support the show, please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd also deeply appreciate it if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us grow, but also enables others seeking inspiration and authenticity to discover our community. Until next time, keep embracing your story with purpose.